27,000 feet down. In water so black that light has never touched it, a camera is rolling. There is no sound, no color, no movement for hours. And then, something drifts into frame. It's small, pale, almost see-through. It moves slowly, deliberately, like it knows exactly where it's going. It has a face. It has eyes, useless eyes, in a place with nothing to see. And it is alive, at a depth where, according to everything we understand about biology, nothing should be able to survive. The pressure here would crush a submarine like a soda can. The proteins in your body would stop working. Your bones, technically, would begin to dissolve. And yet, here it is, hunting, thriving, living its little life at the bottom of the world. Everything we know about life says this animal should be dead. The pressure should have flattened it. The cold should have stopped it. The dark should have starved it. It didn't get the message. This is the Mariana Trench, the deepest wound on the planet. And something down here is living at an address biology swears should be empty. Let's get one thing straight about scale, because the numbers here are genuinely difficult for a human brain to hold. The Mariana Trench is a gash in the floor of the Western Pacific Ocean. It runs for more than 1,500 miles, longer than the distance from New York to Florida, but it's only about 43 miles wide. And here's the thing to understand before we go any further. This is not a cave. It is not a valley. It is Earth's largest vertical wilderness, a wound in the crust that never closes, where the planet is quietly swallowing its own seafloor, one tectonic plate grinding beneath another and dragging the bottom of the world down into the dark. At its deepest point, a slot-shaped valley called the Challenger Deep, it bottoms out at around 36,000 feet. That's nearly 7 miles straight down. Let me put that in perspective. If you took Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth, and you dropped it into the Challenger Deep, the summit would still be more than a mile underwater. You could stack the world's tallest mountain in this hole and still not reach the surface. So, cozy. The trench gets its name from a British ship, the HMS Challenger, which came sailing through in 1875, doing what ships did back then, lowering a weighted rope over the side to measure the depth. Routine stuff. They'd done it 1,000 times. Except this time, the rope kept going and going. Nearly 27,000 feet of it played out before it finally hit something. The crew on deck had no way of knowing it then, but they had just brushed the edge of the deepest place on the entire planet. And here's the part that gives me chills. One of the officers on that ship was a man named Herbert Swire. We'll come back to him, because almost 150 years later, something living at the bottom of this trench would be named after him. Now, before we meet the residents, you need to understand why the bottom of this trench is supposed to be a dead zone. Because the reason a thing being alive down there is so shocking is physics. As you descend through the ocean, the weight of the water above you stacks up. For every 33 feet you go down, the pressure increases by 1 full atmosphere. That's the entire weight of the sky, pressing in on you, again and again and again. By the time you reach the bottom of the Challenger Deep, the pressure is over 1,000 atmospheres. We're talking about roughly 16,000 pounds pushing on every single square inch. 8 tons. The scientists who study this place have a few ways of describing it. One says it's like balancing 50 jumbo jets on top of you. Another prefers the image of an African elephant standing on your thumb. I don't know which mental picture is worse, honestly. The jets feel more dignified. And it's not just the pressure, it's also pitch black. Sunlight gives up somewhere around 3,000 feet, and the trench is 10 times deeper than that. It's near freezing, hovering between 34 and 39 degrees Fahrenheit. And there's almost no food. Nothing grows here. The only nutrition is marine snow, a gentle, never-ending drizzle of dead things and waste sinking down from the world above. So, just to summarize the brochure, it's dark, it's freezing, you're being crushed by the weight of 50 aircraft, and dinner is the decomposing leftovers of creatures that died miles above you. Naturally, life looked at all of that and said, yeah, I'll move in. For a long time, nobody actually knew if anything could survive down there. The pressure is so extreme that scientists genuinely debated whether complex life was even possible. The theory went like this. Vertebrates, animals with backbones, rely on calcium for their skeletons. And under enough pressure, calcium can't hold its structure. No calcium, no bones. No bones, no fish. By that logic, the bottom of the trench should be a sterile, lifeless void. Then, in 1960, two men decided to go find out for themselves. Their names were Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh, and they climbed into a bizarre contraption called the Bathyscaphe Trieste, basically a giant float tank with a tiny steel sphere bolted to the bottom for the humans. They sank for nearly 5 hours into the dark, and when they finally touched down on the floor of the Challenger Deep, the first humans ever to do so, Piccard looked out the window and saw a fish. At least he thought it was a fish, a flat, soul-like creature that calmly swam away from the lights. Piccard was overjoyed. Here, in an instant, was the answer biologists had wondered about for decades. Life could exist in the greatest depths of the ocean. It was looking right back at him. Now, here's the wrinkle. A lot of scientists today think Piccard didn't actually see a fish at all. Remember, bones shouldn't survive that pressure. So they suspect what he really saw was a sea cucumber, which is a little less heroic. Imagine being the first person to reach the bottom of the world, staring death in the face, and the death you're staring at is a swimming cucumber. History is humbling. Either way, Piccard and Walsh spent about 20 minutes on the bottom, before kicking up so much silt they couldn't see anything, and headed home. It would be another 52 years before a human came back. That human was a movie director, but we'll get to James Cameron in a minute. First, the thing in our cold open, the creature that found a loophole. Meet the Mariana snailfish, and try not to be disappointed. Because when I told you there's a creature thriving at a depth that should kill it, your brain probably pictured a monster. Gnashing fangs, glowing eyes, a nightmare with a mouth. That's what the deep is supposed to build. The Mariana snailfish is a small, pale pink, tadpole-shaped blob, about 4 to 8 inches long. It has no scales. Its skin is so translucent you can look right through it and see its liver. It looks less like an apex predator and more like something you'd find stuck to the side of a fish tank you forgot to clean. Truly the terror of the deep. But do not let the looks fool you. This unassuming little gummy bear of a fish is the most extreme vertebrate on planet Earth. It lives around 26,000 to 27,000 feet down, roughly 8,000 meters. And down there, it is the apex predator. Not because it's vicious, because of where it stands. Every hunter above it in the ocean eventually runs out of depth. The water gets too deep, too cold, too crushing, and they turn back. The snailfish doesn't turn back. It lives at the last address biology is allowed to occupy, and it owns it completely, cruising through the black, vacuuming up shrimp with a gulp of suction, looking, in the words of the scientists who study it, very well fed. Down here, at the bottom of everything, the most powerful animal in the room is a translucent pink blob the length of your hand. The trench doesn't reward teeth. It rewards whoever refuses to leave. The trick to surviving all that pressure is hidden in a single molecule, TMAO, trimethylamine oxide. Think of it as biological scaffolding. Under crushing pressure, proteins want to deform and quit. TMAO swoops in and holds them in shape. And here's the eerie, elegant part. The deeper a snailfish lives, the more of this molecule its body packs in. Evolution, writing a survival manual one chemical at a time. But even TMAO has a limit. Around 8,200 meters, about 27,000 feet, the math runs out. Below that depth, the chemistry simply can't hold a vertebrate together anymore. Scientists call it the boundary of fish life, the wall, the place where backbones are no longer allowed. And the snailfish lives right up against that wall, right at the final edge of what life can do. It has swum to the end of the possible, pressed its face to the railing of existence, and made a home there, in the last few feet before the ocean stops allowing anything with a spine at all. That fish, by the way, the Mariana snailfish, its scientific name is Pseudoliparus swirae. Swirae, as in Herbert Swire, the officer on the HMS Challenger from 1875. The crew that first found this trench gave their name to the creature that would one day be found surviving at its bottom. I told you we'd come back to him. For years, the record for the deepest fish ever observed sat right around 8,100 meters. Then, on an expedition to a neighboring trench in the Western Pacific, a baited camera was lowered into the dark and left to wait. At 8,336 meters down, that's 27,349 feet, a snailfish swam into view. It is, to this day, the deepest a fish has ever been recorded. The single deepest vertebrate sighting in the history of our species. A living animal, filmed in the few feet of ocean where the rulebook says backbones simply give out. We don't even have a name for that one yet. It's a species science has seen, but never caught. A face in the dark that we've watched on a screen and have never been able to hold. Sit with that for a second. We have mapped the surface of Mars in higher resolution than this part of our own planet. We have a creature on film right now that we cannot identify, living in a place we've visited fewer than 10 times in human history. The deepest fish on Earth is, functionally, a stranger. The snailfish gets the headlines, but it is far from alone down there. The trench has a whole cast of characters, and frankly, some of them are stranger than any monster. First, the xenophyophores. The name means bearer of foreign bodies, and these things are wild. A xenophyophore is a single cell. One cell. Except instead of being microscopic like a normal cell, it grows to about 4 inches across. It is one of the largest single-celled organisms on the entire planet. A living thing the size of your palm, with no brain, no organs, no nothing. Just one enormous ancient cell sitting in the dark. It builds itself a little shell out of its own waste glued to sediment. It oozes across the seafloor like a slug, and, my favorite detail, it has no known predators. Nothing eats it. It just exists, undisturbed, at the bottom of the world. Honestly, goals. Then you've got the amphipods, shrimp-like scavengers that swarm the trench floor, cleaning up the marine snow. Most are small, a couple inches at best. There's one species, Hirondelia gigas, that survives by eating fallen wood, bits of sunken trees and driftwood that drift all the way down. These little guys can go ages without eating, and then, when food finally arrives, they gorge themselves to the point of literally bursting. Relatable, we've all been to that buffet. But the truly unsettling amphipods are the big ones. When James Cameron's team was testing equipment near Papua New Guinea, they hauled up amphipods 7 inches long, the biggest ever seen at that kind of depth. And they spotted one on camera that looked roughly twice that size. A foot-long deep-sea shrimp, in the dark, coming toward the light. Sleep tight. And then there are the sea pigs, small, transparent sea cucumbers that toddle across the seafloor on little tentacle legs, hoovering up sediment. They look like translucent gummy candies that learn to walk. They are, genuinely, one of the most adorable things in the abyss, which I realize is a low bar, but they clear it. In 2012, 52 years after Picard and Walsh, a human finally returned to the bottom. It was James Cameron. Yes, that James Cameron. The man who made Titanic and Avatar designed a lime green submarine called the Deep Sea Challenger, climbed inside alone, and dove nearly 36,000 feet to the floor of the Challenger deep, solo. Most directors take a vacation between blockbusters. This one decided to visit the most hostile environment on Earth, by himself, in a tube he helped build. But Cameron's dive wasn't a stunt, it was science. His expedition's landers brought back something that, to me, is the most profound discovery in this entire story. At nearly 11,000 meters down, on rocks at the bottom of the trench, they found microbial mats. Strange, filament-like clumps of bacteria living off chemical energy leaching out of the altered rock. No sunlight, no plants, no animals in the food chain, just life, running on pure chemistry. And here's why that matters. Astrobiologists looked at those mats and saw something staggering. This might be what the very roots of life look like. The chemical steps that first turned non-living matter into living matter billions of years ago. Which means the bottom of the Mariana Trench may be one of the closest things we have to a window into how life on Earth began. And it doesn't stop there. If life can run on rock chemistry in crushing sunless cold down here, then it could potentially do the same thing beneath the ice of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, or in the dark oceans of Saturn's Enceladus. The Mariana Trench isn't just the deepest place on Earth. It might be a rehearsal for finding life on other worlds. So we've established it. The bottom of the Mariana Trench is home to fish that defy physics, single cells the size of your hand, shrimp that eat wood, and bacteria that might rewrite the story of life itself. But in 2019, an explorer named Victor Vescovo took a submersible called the Limiting Factor to the very bottom, the deepest manned dive in history. And during his 4 hours down there, he found the one thing in this entire story that truly has no business existing at the bottom of the world. It wasn't a creature, it was a plastic bag. A plastic bag and candy wrappers. 7 miles down, at the most remote, most inaccessible point on the entire surface of the planet, a place humans have visited fewer times than we've walked on the moon, there was our garbage, waiting for him. And it's not a one-off. A plastic bag was detected down here as far back as 1998. When scientists pulled up those wood-eating amphipods and tested them, nearly every single one had microplastics inside its body. Researchers found man-made chemical pollutants, the kind that don't break down for centuries, concentrated in the fat of trench animals at levels higher than some of the most polluted rivers on Earth. Let that sink in. The deepest, darkest, most untouched place we know of is already touched. The snailfish at the final edge of biology, the most extreme survivor on the planet, is swimming through our trash. Plastic, it turns out, sinks more easily than people do. It reached the bottom of the world long before we figured out how to follow it. The wound that never heals, we found a way to infect it anyway. We spent 150 years and untold millions of dollars to reach the one place no human had ever been, only to discover we'd already littered it. Humanity's first words at the bottom of the world should have been profound. Instead, the trench just handed us back our receipt. So here's what's actually down there. A fish that lives where bones shouldn't hold together. A single cell the size of your palm with no predators and no plan. Shrimp that eat trees and burst from joy at the dinner bell. Bacteria that might be the blueprint for all life everywhere. And the thing that, more than any of it, truly does not belong, our own footprint. Here's the part that should keep you up at night though. We have explored less than 20% of our oceans. We have better maps of Mars than of our own seafloor. The creatures we've met in the Mariana Trench, the snailfish, the xenophyophores, the giant amphipods, those are just the ones that happen to drift past the camera during the handful of hours humans have ever spent down there. For every one we've found, the dark is still holding the ones we haven't. Things with no name, no record, no proof. Because nothing has ever pointed a light at them. So I'll leave you with the only question the trench refuses to answer. What's living in the 80% we've never looked at? The deepest fish on Earth is a face we've watched on a screen and have never once held in our hands. And it's waiting, 7 miles down, in the black, at the very edge of what's possible. We just haven't met it yet.